David thought he was the smartest man in the room. He had it all figured out: a wife in the city, a family at the lake house, and a story for every occasion. For 7 years, he played both sides perfectly. What he didn't count on, that I wasn't just his wife. I was his accountant. And when I found the second phone, I didn't just discover his secret family. I found the blueprint for his destruction. My name is Sarah, and I just found out that my husband, David, had 2 families. I was not his only wife. Before I continue, I would like to remind you to subscribe to this channel if you like interesting stories like this. Also, I would like to know what you would do if you found out that your husband had a second family. David built his perfect double life right under my nose, so I made a decision: I wouldn't expose him. I wouldn't scream. I would become a ghost in his machine. I would use his own secrets, his own lies, to systematically dismantle everything he'd built. And by the time I was done, the only thing he'd have left was the bill. David always said my attention to detail was cute. He'd pat my head when I'd color code our family calendar or optimize our grocery list. "That's my little accountant," he'd say, as if my master's degree in finance was a charming hobby. He never understood that my mind didn't just organize playdates and PTA meetings. It could trace the flow of money through a multi-million-dollar corporation, which is exactly what I did for a living before Chloe was born. The second phone wasn't a mistake. It was arrogance, pure, unadulterated male arrogance. He'd gotten so comfortable in his deception, so sure of his own cleverness, that he became sloppy. The buzzing gym bag was his first fatal miscalculation. The second was assuming I was too busy, too trusting, too simple to connect the dots. Finding the phone felt like solving the first piece of a complex equation. The passcode, the date of his proposal to me, was a sickening twist of the knife. It wasn't a tribute to our love. It was a convenient, easily remembered date for his other life. Opening it was like cracking a safe, and inside wasn't money, but a currency of betrayal more valuable than any cash. The photos were a meticulously curated timeline of his alternate reality. Amanda, with her yoga-toned arms and sun-kissed hair. Liam, a 6-year-old boy with David's stubborn cowlick and my husband's exact shade of hazel eyes. Sophia, a miniature replica of her mother, but with David's smile. They were a beautiful family, a happy family, and they were living in my sanctuary. The lake house wasn't just a property, it was my dream. I found it, I negotiated the purchase. I spent 2 years personally renovating every square inch. I sanded the floors, I tiled the bathroom, I planted the hydrangeas that now bloomed in photographs with another woman's children playing before them. He hadn't just cheated on me, he had defiled my sacred space. But the true masterpiece of his deception was the financial architecture. As I began my forensic investigation, a chilling admiration mixed with my rage. He wasn't just skimming from our accounts, he had built a separate financial ecosystem. The financial web. Firstly, he established a shell company that officially owned the lake house's adjacent guest cottage, a property he'd secretly purchased and connected to the main house. It was called L&S Holdings LLC. Secondly, I noticed a portion of his annual bonus was rerouted to a separate account under the guise of independent consulting work. Thirdly, I found 2 health insurance plans, one through his company for us, and a private, gold-tier plan for Amanda and the kids, paid for with pre-tax business expense claims. Finally, I found mirror expenses. Every major purchase for our home was mirrored for his other family. When he bought me a new SUV, he leased one for Amanda. When he upgraded our kitchen, he renovated theirs. He was running a parallel household with surgical precision. For 7 years. I didn't break down. I booted up my old professional-grade accounting software. I created spreadsheets that would make my former corporate clients weep. I mapped every transaction, every withdrawal, every shell company. I became the CEO of my own revenge, and this was my business plan. My first official hire was Maria Cortez, the private investigator. I didn't need her to confirm the affair. I had that. I needed her to be my corporate spy to gather competitive intelligence on the other company, David's second life. Think of it as a hostile takeover, I told her during our first meeting in a soundproofed conference room at my lawyer's office. I need to know their operational weaknesses, their key assets, and their leaders' patterns of behavior. Maria, a woman with the calm demeanor of a sniper, simply nodded. We'll do a full SWOT analysis on his double life. While Maria gathered field intelligence, I worked with Evelyn Shaw, the legal world's equivalent of a scalpel. She wasn't a barracuda, she was a neurosurgeon. We wouldn't just file for divorce, we would file a civil RICO lawsuit, arguing his secret life was an ongoing criminal enterprise designed to defraud me of marital assets. We'll argue fraud, wire fraud for the electronic transfers, money laundering and racketeering, Evelyn explained, her eyes gleaming. It's aggressive, but the pattern is all here. He didn't just have an affair, he ran a criminal operation from your marital home. The plan was set. We would move in 3 phases. Phase 1, gather all evidence and secure all joint assets before he knew he was under attack. More like a silent takeover, an asset freeze. Phase 2, simultaneously serve him with divorce papers and the civil RICO lawsuit at his office, maximizing professional and personal devastation. Phase 3, use the evidence to ensure he lost his job, his reputation, and every penny he'd stolen. A social and financial annihilation. The night before we initiated Phase 2, I couldn't sleep. I stood in the doorway of Chloe's room, watching her sleep, her face so peaceful and trusting. I thought of Liam and Sophia, innocent pawns in their father's game. My rage towards David was a cold, steady flame, but it was tempered by a grim responsibility. I wasn't just fighting for me and Chloe. I was dismantling a lie that was propping up 3 other lives, and when it fell, the collapse would be absolute. David was still asleep in our bed, dreaming whatever dreams a man with 2 families dreams. He had no idea that the quiet, detail-oriented wife he patronized had just become the architect of his ruin. The ghost was in the machine, and in the morning, the system would crash. Phase 1, the silent takeover, was a masterclass in covert operations. While David regaled me with tales of his fabricated business triumphs, I was executing a real one. With power of attorney documents he'd signed years ago for convenience, I began the process of freezing and securing our assets. It was like defusing a bomb, 1 wire at a time. I transferred half of every liquid account into new, secure ones under my name. I placed alerts on all our credit lines. I even contacted the family lawyer who handled our estate planning, and under the guise of estate tax optimization, had David's name removed as the primary beneficiary on my life insurance policies and investment accounts. I was building a financial fortress, and I was quietly raising the drawbridge, leaving him on the outside. Maria delivered her final report. It was a chillingly comprehensive dossier. She had photos of David at a daddy-daughter dance with Sophia, while he told me he was at a team-building retreat. She had records of him using his bonus money to pay for Liam's private baseball league. She even had a copy of a birthday card he'd written to Amanda. To my true wife, the one who holds my real heart. True wife. The words were a brand. He hadn't just shared his body, he had demoted me in his own soul. The most crucial piece of intelligence, however, was psychological. Maria had observed that Amanda was deeply, authentically in love with David. She believed his stories about me being a mentally unstable, agoraphobic ex-wife who he was financially tethered to. She saw herself as the heroic, patient, real partner. She had no idea she was the other woman. This was my leverage. Amanda wasn't a villain, she was another victim. And a victim who believed she was the hero could be a powerful, unpredictable ally. The day of shock and awe was a Tuesday. I chose it because Tuesdays were when David held his senior leadership meetings. He loved the power, the spectacle of it. I dressed with intention. A sharp, black Alexander McQueen suit I hadn't worn since my corporate days. Heels that clicked with authority. I looked in the mirror and didn't see a betrayed wife. I saw a CEO arriving to fire a corrupt executive. At 10:05 a.m., as confirmed by a text from Maria who was parked outside his office building, a process server walked into the boardroom. On live video conference with the company's international branches, David was served with 2 documents: the petition for dissolution of marriage and a 50-page civil RICO lawsuit. Evelyn Shaw had assured me the scene would be memorable, She was right. David's colleagues later told me he turned the color of parchment. He tried to laugh it off as a crazy prank until the HR director, who had received a courtesy copy, entered the room and asked to speak with him. He was placed on administrative leave immediately. By 3:00 p.m., he was officially terminated. Gross misconduct and actions detrimental to the company, the termination letter read. The scandal was too great. The corporate world has no stomach for a CEO who funds his secret family with company bonuses. He came home in a state of sheer, unadulterated panic. I was waiting for him in the living room, a cup of tea in my hand, the picture of calm. "What did you do?" he roared, his face contorted with a fury I'd never seen. "I did what any competent executive would do when she discovers embezzlement and fraud within her own organization," I said, my voice even. "I conducted an audit, and I terminated the responsible party." "You've ruined me," he screamed, spittle flying from his lips. "No, David," I corrected him, taking a slow sip of tea. "You were the one embezzling from your own family. I just balanced the books." The confrontation was nothing like the dramatic scenes in movies. There were no thrown vases, no tearful accusations. It was a cold, clinical debriefing. I presented the evidence like a boardroom presentation. The spreadsheets, the photos, the financial trails. With each piece of evidence he deflated, his bluster replaced by a dawning, horrifying comprehension. He wasn't dealing with a hysterical wife. He was dealing with a superior intellect who had outmaneuvered him at every turn. His final, desperate play was emotional. "Sarah, please. It was a mistake. I love you. I love Chloe. It was just sex." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. It's not just sex when you buy a second home, David. It's not just sex when you have 2 children. It's not just sex when you build an entire financial and emotional infrastructure to support a second life. You didn't have an affair. You committed bigamy in everything but the legal ceremony. I stood up, my work done. "The locks will be changed by morning. Your things will be packed and sent to a storage unit. Any further communication can go through my lawyer." As I walked up the stairs, leaving him shattered in the living room, I felt no triumph, only a grim sense of completion. Phase 2 was over. The shock had been delivered. The awe was the realization dawning on his face that he had lost control of the narrative entirely. Now it was time for Phase 3, the social and financial annihilation. A collapse, when done correctly, is not a single explosion. It's a series of controlled demolitions, each one weakening the structure until the final, graceful implosion into a pile of dust. David's life was my structure, and I had the detonator. The first demolition was social. I didn't need to smear him. The truth, when delivered with clinical precision, is a more effective weapon than rumor. I sent a brief, factual email to our close friends and family. It read, "Dear friends, it is with a heavy heart that I must inform you that David and I are divorcing. Recently, I discovered that for the past 7 years, David has been leading a double life with another woman, with whom he has 2 children. He has been financially supporting this second family using our joint assets. I know this news will be as shocking to you as it was to me. I ask for your patience and privacy for myself and our daughter, Chloe, during this time." The response was a tsunami of support for me. His phone began ringing off the hook with calls from stunned and furious relatives. His own brother called me, his voice choked with shame, to apologize. David was socially radioactive. The second demolition was Amanda. I knew she was the key to ensuring David couldn't spin a false narrative. I drove to the lake house on a Wednesday afternoon. I found her in the garden, pulling weeds. She looked up, and for a moment there was no recognition. Then her eyes widened in horror. "You," she whispered, scrambling to her feet. "Me," I said calmly. "The agoraphobic, mentally unstable ex-wife. We need to talk, Amanda." I didn't confront her. I educated her. I showed her the same binder I'd shown David. I showed her the financial records proving the lake house was legally mine long before David fabricated the story of his inheritance. I showed her the photos of our family, of David with me, and Chloe on the same holidays he'd spent with her. The transformation on her face was a tragedy to witness. The certainty, the love, the 7 years of her life, it all crumbled into dust. She began to sob, great, heaving sobs of utter devastation. "He told me you were a monster," she choked out. "He said he was trapped." "He is a monster," I said, my voice softening for the first time. "But not for the reasons you think. He's a monster of cowardice and greed, and he played us both." In that moment, an alliance was forged not in friendship, but in mutual destruction. She gave me access to everything, his emails to her, his promises, the lies he'd told about me. In return, I promised her I would not fight her for child support. I would even help her sue him for fraud. She became the star witness in my case, her testimony the final nail in David's coffin. The final demolition was the legal ruling. With the RICO lawsuit hanging over him, David was forced to settle the divorce on my terms. The judgment was so brutal it was written about in legal journals. He was ordered to reimburse me for every cent spent on Amanda and the children, plus 50% penalties. Sign over his entire 401k and stock portfolio to me. I kept the primary house and the lake house, free and clear. He was ordered to pay maximum spousal and child support, calculated based on his former CEO salary, not the pittance he was now earning as a consultant. He was financially nuked. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment, his credit in ruins, his professional reputation ashes. The final act of my revenge was poetic. I sold the lake house, not just to anyone, but to a young, vibrant family from the city, a husband, a wife, and their 2 young children. As I signed the papers, I thought of the new memories that would be made there, honest ones. With the proceeds, I started my own financial consultancy, specializing in forensic accounting for women going through divorce. I called it Balance Sheet. A year later, Chloe is thriving. She knows her father made choices that hurt our family, and she sees him on supervised weekends. The light in her eyes has returned. My business is booming. I am not just successful, I am powerful. I saw David once from a distance, getting coffee. He looked old, shrunken, the arrogance completely drained from him. He was just a man, a small, pathetic man who thought he could outsmart the system. My system. He thought he could have 2 of everything. But in the end, the equation was simple. His greed was greater than his intelligence, and my intelligence was greater than his greed. He lost it all. And I didn't just get everything. I got myself back. And that was the final calculation he never saw coming.